Welcome to the forum and to the audience that's listening to us. Thank you, first of all, Yuosof, for jumping into the panel at the last minute. And welcome on board to Mohammad and Martin as well. So Anisha has already set the scene talking about how, everybody, all the organizations had to huddle into remote working of employees, due to the pandemic. But one thing that's changed is as the pandemic recedes, thankfully, the remote working sort of is being embraced now by organizations as almost an essential requirement. It's for employees, it gives them work-life balance. It gives them opportunity to, have a flexible work life. And it's sort of become almost part of the culture in quite a few organizations. And as you see in a lot of government entities and governments are also recognizing this now. And I think what it does for cybersecurity professionals like us is that actually it only expands this responsibility of protecting these remote workers and the mix of on-site workers throughout as an expanded responsibility. It's not something that's going to go away for better or for worse. And possibly it'll benefit, the organizations moving forward. So I'm going to actually move on to capture some of the questions and sort of set the stage for the four of you. Maybe start with let's talking about, first of all, so what can we identify are the key threats by this remote working and how can we start addressing this? So if I can ask Mohammad to probably start and then we can move on to other panelists as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Kaushik. Actually, as you said, it's a new normal now, working from home since the situation of COVID-19. So everyone realized the importance of controlling the environment from during this during the work from home ways. So the government, for example, they actually release some regulations. Some governments release some regulations. For example, in Saudi National Cybersecurity Authority, they release some cybersecurity guidelines for working from home. And it has really, it is rich with some beneficial control for the both private sector and public sector. So if we think about the threat to your question, we have two things to think about: threats on the environment from the inside of the environment, from backend. And threats from the user side when he at home working. So first of all, about the environment, we need to all the cybersecurity aspect to enable the work from home environment for different employees. And for example, we need to identify how many devices are eligible to connect and work remotely. Is these devices have MDM, for example, mobile device management? Do we have a control over them? Do we have enough monitoring for them? Do we have endpoint security, for example, on these devices? And even it's beyond that. How are we gonna push some update to its operating system, to its application on those machines, and how to educate people from inside more and raise their awareness as well to cover the actually. Working from home is even less risky than working from public places. For example, using public Wi-Fi. We all see some employees, they don't want to work from home. Maybe they have some noise or so they prefer to go for cafes, for restaurants, for whatever places they go. And this is the risky part where they can start using the public Wi-Fi and they are not aware about the cybersecurity risk. So from that side, I would say there is something, it's all about the awareness of the user, how he can use web browsing securely, for example. Does he know about the secure web browsing? For example, the picture of look beside the link. This is a very simple thing. If they understood that, it will be awesome. And it is the responsibility of the cybersecurity department to raise their awareness about it, maybe with some policies or with training or with messages. Periodic SMSs even. This kind of things should be included as officially as possible, part of the cybersecurity general training as one of the hot topic, how to work from home. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that's a good point. In fact, you kind of expanded the risk scenario more from just home to pretty much everywhere else they work from. I'd like to bring in Yuosof, maybe for your point of view on this, the increased threats that are there from this remote working.
Okay, thank you. And it's my pleasure to join you, even if it is the last minute. We all live this pandemic days from first minute. Actually, I want to differentiate here between two topics, remote work or on-call support or admin VPN. This is there in IT since long time, but it was, as Mohammad said, it is from our machine, MDM, we control those machines. We allow those machines for specific places, maybe based on request. And also the user authorization privilege specific to do some task on some systems. So it is not open. And the system itself, firewalls, the admin portal is designed for this purpose. The complete structure is designed to support the admin access or admin role for in a specific time with the proper change request. So it's really controlled and logged and comply with the access and the regulation. But work from home, it's sudden. It's another story. It's suddenly all future came. The end user dream that he can access any data, any information in business from anywhere, any device. This became as a business requirement to it's look like disaster recovery. Just we need to start working on Sunday. So the pandemic happened here in Saudi on Thursday. On Sunday, the user need to continue working. And the first, it was like temporary situation. For how long, we don't know. Maybe 2 months, 3 months, we don't know. But it's a temporary situation. Business operation put high demand to start to open the system for the users. The government basic control, essential control in Saudi, it's very rich, and it covers all situations almost any. But they released new one for teleworker. I think they call it TCC. This is for teleworker control, and it's for specific scenarios like remote work or work from home. And I think all work from home now become like remote worker. I think something will continue. The right technologies, usually it was like a luxury for work from home. It is not mandatory technology that the organization have to allow the user to log into the information and system from anywhere at any time. But in this situation, it becomes mandatory. You have to have those technology that can support and secure the systems and the access. You have to have huge VPN resource to handle all your concurrent VPN connection. So it is not only for admin, 1 or 2 at the same time. No, maybe all your half of your employee will work on the VPN in the morning. So you have to have huge appliance to support those VPN. Device management, application management, data loss prevention, all these technology become mandatory. Vulnerability management also or poster check for the device that you are allowed to join to your network. There is a lot of technologies came in place in the picture suddenly. Maybe a lot of organization face budget issue or configuration issue, or it takes time until they comply with the regulation for teleworker or remote worker.
Okay, thank you so much, Yuosof. And I think that's quite a valid point. I'd like to come to Martin now, because Yuosof mentioned about how we've had, while the remote working environment has sort of increased in organizations, even the technology has sort of been made available or has sort of expedited itself. Solutions have come on board, either they were just largely ignored previously, or people didn't think they were that essential, because obviously most organizations define their cybersecurity posture based on what their working environment was. So for you to touch upon how you think, being from beyond identity, as to how have companies responded in your view in terms of meeting this need? Do you see that there's been a sort of positive contribution?
Yeah, I think the first thing I'd say in this new world we're living in is that the help desk teams really have my sympathies for what they're having to deal with. If you think over the last 10 years with the digital transformation many organizations have gone through, and they've had to learn to live beyond their perimeter already. They've had to deal with so many of their services moving to the cloud adoption, and they've had to adapt the technologies and try and put control points in for a different world. And that's challenging enough. Now, of course, when the change we're having with the whole home working element to this, so it's not just the target endpoint has moved out of their direct control, but of course now the source endpoint has moved out of their direct control. And so they're having to sort of firefight and look at a vast array of new technologies and how they can sort of address all of these new attack vectors. I did see some recent sort of an analysis and research done by an organization called SpyCloud. And what they've found is, since the home working initiative has come about over the last couple of years, is that there has been a significant increase in malware infections, because help desks haven't been able to keep up with these sudden changes. When you've gone from this controlled environment, as I think Mohammad mentioned earlier, with the MDMs and EDRs, all of a sudden they're not applicable in all situations. They're having to deal with bring your own device, and the existing constraints they have in place or controls they have simply aren't stretching that far. But at the same time, they're not in a position to force users to use those controlled devices, because they're not always available for all users who need access to all of these resources. So yes, the organizations have moved, and some have moved quicker than others and have been able to close these doors on problems and address the attack vectors more than others. But that sort of research I've seen from SpyCloud suggests what we can't get away from is, as a result of this home working, the sort of attack service that your organization has to address has increased, and breaches have increased. So I think we'll possibly come to some elements later on, maybe in this panel, where we'll talk about some of the changes that you can make to really zoom in on the specific things that can really make a difference. So if the managers out there, support your help desks more and more. They need your assistance. They need more bandwidth. They are swamped at the moment trying to address this.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. So I move on to the next point, and this I would like to start with probably Yuosof. You're from logistics, right? And logistics, I think, was crucial during the pandemic. There was a spur of people ordering stuff online, and almost the world went into a huddle, and everything depended on the systems working effectively. And what has also happened is that a lot of businesses have sort of changed the way they function. They've evolved into a more e-commerce and online sort of, in brick mortar shop sort of mix. And obviously that has changed the way we work. So I just wanted to know, what you from your organization have actually, done to sort of make yourself ready. Like, what changes have you seen in the last 2 years that you've done, which has sort of changed the way how you're future ready for this new normal?
Actually, this situation and the readiness or recovery almost touch all the environment. And we work heavily with the developer. When I said we, it's from IT perspective, from cybersecurity. It's not only my organization, but me and my colleagues from cybersecurity and vendors and the application developer, we start like a workshop. I remember these days in the start that everybody start to talk to everybody for 24/7. I think I never saw a workshop like this heavily with the developer and vendor support and managed service provider to overcome this situation, because the infrastructure itself, the applications, the database, the FTPs, the integration, it's designed to be inside the center, and all your IT support, high privilege user work from inside your organizations. We cannot, from cybersecurity, just open everything to everybody, and even we don't have the capability. As I said, the VPN appliance, it's have some capability, and from specs part and from license also. Design the authorization to the user to access the system. This is a huge work between different departments, and required also some security controls to be in place to be able to allow the user to access the web application, not the database, as an example, or the application servers or the FTP. So bandwidth also. We work with the network team to provide the required bandwidth to move from inside to outside. Imagine also that all meetings start to become online meeting. In addition to the operation, you have also the online meeting. Of course, all these activity in IT open another door in compliance and threats. And I like the 3 tiers architecture from the security standard, that user access the web application, not application or database. So we work heavily with the application team to redesign their application to respect these, because the user become now access from outside. Even how we're gonna exchange data from inside to outside, and how you're gonna classify the data, which data to be exchanged outside, and it's in a very short time. You cannot complete everything, but you just start discussing the controls and how you can implement it. It's like bring your own device now, because we cannot give all employee laptops. So now you're accepting personal device to connect to your organization. How are you going to manage the meeting, the files, the document? Are you going to allow the user to download financial data in his home, in his laptop, or maybe in a coffee shop? So the system architecture, the process, all change. So it's affect. If you can see CIS control or NIST control, all these control you need to revisit, and the policy. Maybe the policy have huge update in 2020 and 21, just to cover such situations.
you. I'm going to ask a question to Mohammad now. Obviously, you've touched upon things about the changing of the policies and even the standards that we traditionally have been using in a remote working, in a non-remote working environment. And it's a fair point. I mean, we've had developers and security experts huddling together to make sure that we can adapt quickly to this new environment. Mohammad, from your experience and from your interaction with organizations, especially government entities, how much do you think culture plays a role? Because it's almost like, when things go back to normal, people want to go back to what is familiar and what is safe. Everybody wants to go back to online, keeping few of the new generation companies outside the realm who feel that, yeah, we can work remotely. How do you feel culture plays a role? And have you seen any shift back to people trying to sort of protect the old guard, or are they sort of reluctantly accepting? And what affects this change for, in your opinion? Sorry, you're on mute.
Okay, thank you for this question, although it's a bit tricky. So I believe in Kingdom, honestly, and now I'm working outside the Kingdom, a really great transformation, digital transformation, and I don't think it will get back anymore. We will head to more advanced technology, to more successful transition and transformation to digitalize everything. So from the government side, I see all entities are transforming in some way from their perspective. We can see the services now are provided online. You can order from government, actually, even the official papers, even they will actually, with the help of logistic services, they will deliver to you everything. So coming back to the cybersecurity, this will open definitely the threats of the digital transformation, the online services, and from other point, from a cybersecurity perspective, what actually the most important part is to identify those risks. A solid risk management framework and process with a methodological way, and as my colleague Yuosof said, updating in a regular basis the policies, especially the policies that touch the remote working. For example, bring your own device policy, the architecture, security architecture reviews in a periodic basis to identify all threats related to the remote working. All of this will affect the success of the transition to make everyone have a mature level in enabling the businesses to work from home. Actually, it's my first time to know that some organization now in private sector and in public sector, they start marketing some jobs online for online working, work from home, and you will get the job. And the strange thing is, it's not like a simple job. It's even heavy jobs. Like I've seen a CISO work from home, a full-time job, work from home. Now, how the CISO can do that? Because he definitely can have access to some confidential data. So that means it will be shared over the internet. Some other jobs, for example, require some access to sensitive systems. For consideration task, need to have access to the most critical databases. So how you can make sure to secure that, to enable the business to success in this period. So all of these things need to be considered. The architecture, the 3-tier architecture, it's a must. I believe it's in some regulations, especially in the Saudi, it is a must to comply with this type of architecture. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, it does. And in fact, I mean, the governments across have, and besides the private enterprises, the governments have taken this opportunity to go online. I mean,
exactly.
Even complex functions like immigration activities and everything have moved online. I mean, you could get your visas. I think you've sort of gradually moved us to a question where we can bring Martin as an expert on board. Back again at the third question, just, now that this changing environment is requiring, even allowing, as Mohammed said, a CISO to work from home, having access to confidential data or the level of challenges, threats, and vulnerabilities that would come across with these kind of remote working environments. Well, could you elaborate a little bit from your point of view, from your experience, as to how this can be tackled?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I think it's worth pointing out that organizations really need to work their way through a minefield of terminology, and that the security industry, of which I'm part of, sort of throw at customers. So you'll see buzzwords everywhere, whether it's zero trust, identity is the new perimeter, passwordless, next-gen MFA. It takes some time to pull those pieces apart and actually understand, what does it mean under the cover? Is that the solution for me? It sounds great, but then you look into it, and is it really solving the problems that I need? Exactly as you say, how can I be sure my CISO really is properly, secured when he's accessing this very highly sensitive data? It's also true, I think, that many organizations have a significant security spend on systems that help detect malicious behavior and then react to it, whether that's reporting, whether it's responding, and maybe ideally cutting off the activity as soon as possible. But there's no getting away that that's a reactive response to malicious behavior. So the approach that, that I'm a very fervent believer in is that we change that. We move the security to the left as much as possible. So when these remote users, your CISOs, are trying to access data, their very first touch point, you need to make that as secure as you can. Of course, the detection response still has to happen, but the more that you can cut down the potential for intrusion in the first place, then the more bandwidth you have to detect those, very, undercover sort of attacks that, get past any other preventions that you have. So to do that, I think there's two distinct areas that you need to address. The first area is really the identity. Identity is the key to everything. You hear the term identity is the new perimeter, moving away from the old firewall siloed environments. And so a key focus of that is that you have to identify the user, ideally to a high level of assurance, to be really sure they are who they claim to be. What that level of assurance is will vary from one organization to another. How much money you spend to establish that identity is different from one place to another, depending on the nature of what you're protecting. But it's a fundamental point that if your establishment of an identity is based upon shared secrets, then you've lost the game already. You cannot rely on shared secrets as a means of establishing an identity with any level of assurance. So obviously shared secrets, and fundamentally they're talking about passwords. So if you're relying on passwords entirely, you really need to reassess that. If you are using a means of MFA as a way of leveling up that assurance, but you're still relying on passwords underneath, well, beware, because many organizations can't afford to implement MFA across the entire estate. So those vulnerable passwords, if they're still there, can still give avenues of ingress to malicious users. So ideally, you want to try and get rid of those passwords. And then the MFA itself, for those who were on the chat I gave earlier on, we're actually realizing in the industry that MFA as a solution to the problem of establishing identity is actually quite erroneous. If you look at the majority of MFAs that are out there today, so whether it's you get a code to your SMS, whether you invoke a mobile app and you look up an OTP code and enter that, or the newer kid on the block, the push notifications that you receive, which is nice for a user to use. They just press accept and therefore I've used another device, therefore I'm secure, you can be sure it's me. Realistically, ask those situations, how secure are those mechanisms? A common attack now is just to continually bombard a user. It's happened to myself. I've received push, and I thought, well, I've just done a push notification in order to get into my corporate email. Is that push, is that relevant to that particular event? Do I have enough context to make a decision? All it takes is one guy to say, oh, stop bombarding me, I'll press accept. What was the purpose of that MFA? The user is then in. And then across all of these factors, every one of them is phishable. Okay, all these common factors, newer standards like WebAuthn maybe, where you're tying security to a hardware device, they're not phishable. You're actually avoiding a man-in-the-middle type attack. They're moving you into a better direction to actually be sure that the user is who they say they are. It's not just someone who's got access to a shared key or is compromised a phishable MFA. So you really need to look at those unphishable MFAs. And so the term generally there is around device-bound identity. So can you cryptographically link a user to an identity with a high level of assurance? So that's the first element, is around that identity. But then directly to the point of the CISO, let's say we've put in these MFA factors. Let's say we really know it is the CISO that's accessing this sensitive security information. What then about the device that CISO is using? So maybe you're in a fortunate position where it is a corporate managed device that he is using, and it's got your EDR and you've got firewall protections and it's part of your MDM solution. But practically with this move to home working, that's not the norm anymore. There will be some measure of bring your own device that is necessary, whether it's a major part of the estate or whether it's a small part, it's still a part. And all an intruder needs is one avenue to get into your environment. So you need to think about the bigger picture. So you need to make sure, as well as knowing it really is the CISO, that their device is secure. So whether the firewall's up, whether he's on an encrypting file system, whether there's an EDR in place, maybe he's using his mobile phone. So you want to make sure it's not jailbroken. You want to make sure that biometrics are enabled on that device. So it's very important that you need both to establish identity to a high level of assurance, and that the device they're connecting from is secure as well. We've talked a fair bit there about policies, and of course you need to look at all the policies that are relevant to your environment. And there's a trade-off here. You may want to have a single one-size-fits-all of policies. So you must have an MDM, or you must have this core set of policies across all devices for simplicity, and that's got its own security benefits. But you may also need to be a little bit more sensitive to different application needs. So you might need to tweak your policies to different applications. So what is the application that the CISO is accessing? So maybe certain things you will allow him to use is bring your own device phone. For certain services he accesses, but maybe for other services, well, no, we won't allow an Android phone to be used there, even if it's not jailbroken. Maybe we want to enforce a specific platform, a specific MDM or EDR. So you need to have that granularity of control where appropriate. And the final thing I'd say about this is that ideally this checking you're doing of identity and also the device needs to be a continuous approach. So this is very much the Gartner view that they've been trying to push out to the market for many years, this Carter approach, this continuous assessment and risk and trust assessment. And that's exactly what, our company tries to push out to the market as well. It's a continuous point. So we do it at the first time the user accesses your environment. That's when you establish the device posture. But then that's not the only time. You need to make sure at regular intervals, can you check, is that device the CISO still using? Is it still compliant with the policy I have in place? So if the firewall has been dropped either manually or via some other malicious process that you haven't been able to detect because it's a zero-day exploit, for example, then you need to be able to alert on that, maybe even pull a kill switch and actually kick that user out because they're no longer compliant. Okay, so.
Yeah, and I think that kind of addresses the evolution of even the attacks that are there. It's obviously they're always a step ahead of what you evolve. I mean, and generally we stick to MFA as sort of now the magic bullet for everything for remote access, and it's sort of becoming a trend, so to speak. But it's a good point that the identity is also something that has to be dynamic, and it has to be something that can be validated. Again, you touched upon the point on, you know, how you can have security policies and processes in place to the point where you almost don't, you know, you cannot effectively replicate your office environment in someone else's house, and then you pretty much might as well have a firewall and a whole infrastructure deployed in their house as well. And how practical is that for us to do that? I do like that one point that was very interesting, that if you were to ask people to not use a specific device, it would have severe budgetary implications for everyone asking for an iPhone, which is something operationally becomes a real challenge. But I'll ask Yuosof as well. Yuosof, can you also add on to what Martin has said around, you know, how you think, you know, these kind of challenges can be tackled, and what technology you think are best suited for that?
Yes, and as Martin talked about, those challenges behind the traditional security controls like IDS, IPS, DDoS, web application firewall, enterprise endpoint protection. This trigger another control heavily, like from cybersecurity, like the vulnerability management. Still, we have to have a heavily vulnerability management process. It's become very crucial to scan all the infrastructure, especially the touch point, especially not only the web application servers or public IPs, even the touch points that the user uses their own device to access to it. Also, the data leakage prevention or data loss prevention, the DLP journey, I think it's a must to start. It is not an optional anymore, or something in the roadmap. The organization need to start to identify their sensitive data, where it is stored, from where it's downloaded, how the user access to these sensitive data. They need to start with the classification to these data. Maybe they can start with the manual classification from the user as document classification, what we call. We put some control. These type of document you can print. This you can take screenshot in your Android or iPhone or whatever this you cannot take. Those type of data you can share it outside approved application, but some confidential or high confidential data you cannot copy paste. So you disable these services if you have MAM or the MDM. So you have to start put these controls. It's a journey, and the organization need to start to just to try to cover and minimize the data leakage. And also another team, they have to be in place, what we call it, security incident for data, security data. So it is not normal data breach that in the morning I see like 1 tera upload to outside. No, it's a small type, it's maybe one document, but contain 100 of credit card or employee information or customer information. So this is another type of incident. And the other thing, it's really work with the MAM and the MDM. So for MDM, if it's for your corporate device, it's you can't manage it, control it, delete it, wipe, block, whatever you want. It's your device. Mobile application management, it's how you want the users or your employee work with your data. So you allow this, you don't allow this, you allow the copy, you allow the paste of your information without interfere with their personal information on the device. So Yeah, it's a multiple technology.
Yeah,
you need to work on it.
All right, thanks. Thank you, Yuosof. Martin, you mentioned something very, very briefly, where you said that, if you were to use MFA and you could frustrate the employee in sort of just, eventually person thinks that, oh, he's required to actually click yes to it or accept that particular thing. And I think that's just the point that I want to come to now. I know Mohammad mentioned about this at the beginning as well. And I was reading about the fact that, is it time now with remote working workforces and, people working offshore, whether employees being the sort of the weakest or the strongest link in the mix, should they be assessed for their security capability or their understanding, and how can we build that awareness effectively within the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. The industry's been saying for decades that the weakest link is the user. And at the end of the day, it might just be one single user clicking on a single link on a malicious email that brings your organization to its knees and costs you a lot of money or even puts you out of business. So there needs to be significant effort to make sure that your users are as aware as they possibly can be. So fundamentally, it needs to be a regular process, and that process needs to be audited. So there's lots of organizations out there that can help companies. I've worked a fair bit in the past with KnowBe4 as an organization, where Kevin Mitnick works and Roger Grimes. So they've got a wealth of expertise and knowledge about being on one side of the wall and now the good side of the wall. So they understand, what the vulnerabilities are, what people will fall for. So they can really help with developing the awareness training that you need. The key mantra that they talk a lot about is the whole concept of stop, look, and think. So if ever a user receives an email message, before interacting with it, clicking on anything, should always stop. And then they need to look, and they need to look for telltale sort of symbol or indicators that, is there something wrong here? So often you will see that the email itself that you've received is unexpected, okay? And often that unexpected email or unexpected telephone call or SMS message you get is trying to induce some sort of rashness on your behalf. They're trying to get you to don't think, act quickly. You need to click on here because your account's compromised. You need to click here, in order to stop your bank details being or bank being emptied or whatever. So anytime that's a very much a big warning sign is trying to get you to act quickly without thinking is a warning sign you need to look for. And so the other thing then is to think about it, is as well as looking at the action, the grammar that's in the message that you've received. Is it well written? That's often a sign that it's maybe not their first language, that they're trying to do something, and it can often be quite easy to spot. Check the from address. The most common way that people try and spoof and phish users is to maybe use a letter I instead of a letter L, because it looks the same when you glance at that address field. So you should always, make sure that the address is the thing, where it's coming from, or is coming from where you think it is. So they can help you develop training that will highlight these things, but you need to make sure that people can't be in a situation where they can I'll just press play, I'll go and have a coffee, I'll come back later and say I've done it, because they gain nothing from that. And so you need to make sure that your security awareness training is properly audited and it's signposted. It's at certain points in that training, you stop the user and test that they have actually taken some of it in, even just, simple question and answers, just to make sure this email, what warning signs do you see in this email? And if they don't get them all, it's fine. You're not there to sort of cause them trouble. You're there to make them aware that, but you didn't notice that from field. You didn't notice this grammar here, you didn't notice that problem there, you didn't hover over the link and see where it's taking you to. And so it is about training them, but making sure that they actually do it and they do learn those lessons. Also, you want to make sure that any training you have is kept fresh. If you have this sort of training and you reel it out once every 6 months, once every year, and get the user to go through it again, they'll go, oh, seen this before. Yeah, I'll not really pay any attention to it. I'll get on with my day job, and they're not actually getting that refresher that could make all the difference. Because as I say, all it can take is one lack of thought where they don't stop and think, they just click. And then they think, oh, should I have done that? But it may well be too late at that point. The other elements about the security awareness training that I've seen works well with various companies is actually to run a phishing campaign internally themselves to actually test the workforce. So it can backfire a little bit to some extent. These days where organizations have instant messaging, whether it's Slack, whether it's Teams or whatever, you may kick off this phishing campaign just to see how many people click on the link, and then you can then do one-on-one education with them to make sure, look, you shouldn't have done this and this is why, and so they can really learn from it. But you might find that somebody puts out on Slack or something, oh, this looks like a malicious email. Has anyone else received this? And it sort of puts a hole in your phishing campaign. But I wouldn't be despondent if that happens, because the mere fact of that is great. That's at least one person has paid attention, but also it's a talking point. People are aware from it, and it makes people think, oh, my company runs these internal phishing campaigns. I don't want to be the one that looks an idiot and I clicked on it and I have to have a conversation with my line manager or the team from the security organization. So audited regular processes as well as periodic phishing campaigns, just to make sure people put into practice what you've taught them.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Martin. I mean, obviously we need to be a lot more innovative, even when it comes to creating awareness. I'm not sure if there are any questions, Anisha, so I'm just going to start by just getting final inputs. Maybe you'll start with Mohammad, just in the interest of time, both from the last question as well as just an overall overview of your final inputs onto this discussion.
Actually, I like what Martin said, so I will add to it one important point related to any cybersecurity awareness program. It needs to distinguish between the levels of employees. So, for example, here I'm talking about the executives. They need the cybersecurity program need to have a minimum understanding. Here, when I'm saying understanding, that means they need to understand what is it exactly, the way how to identify a phishing mail, not only by checking the letters if it's fake or not, no, but rather one more step in details. The mail header, so he can detect what is the original mail. Some people will say an executive will not think about it and they don't have time to do it. I can assure that it will not take more than 30 seconds to identify from the mail header. This is a good level of understanding. If we agreed with all executive, they should have this minimum understanding about email, about web browsing, how to respond, how to report a suspicious thing. And it always needs to convey the message from cybersecurity program to all employees that even if it's a false positive alert, just report, even if it's false positive. Even with time, you will learn more what is the exact and it will not harm. It will make some noise for the cybersecurity team, but that should be fine. At least having more false positive, it's at least less risky than having a false negative, true false negative. Yeah. So these kind of things need to be understood and distinguished between the levels. Some business employees always repeat, and I have heard it a lot. We are not a technology guy. I'm not a technology guy. I don't know anything about IT, cybersecurity. I don't know anything about this. No, they need to understand that, especially with the big digital transformation that private sector, public sector trying to the most important piece to make it happen and make it success. So that's it, and thank you for hosting me in this great event.
Thanks, Mohammad. Yuosof, can I get some final words from you?
Yeah, thank you. I like what my colleague said. I just want to add one last thing, that align the security awareness and training with the SOC team findings. So to match the reality of the organization. Each organizations have specific alerts and incidents. So aligning this with the awareness and training plan, I think just to cover the priority cases that the SOC team usually report. But my colleague, they talk about everything about the awareness and training. Thanks for them, and I'm glad to be with you.
Thank you. Martin, anything from your end? Close.
Yeah, just very briefly, just I guess getting back to the premise of this particular panel is all about, the impact of home working. What I'd summarize it as saying is, where we are right now, the attack surface has increased undoubtedly. Secondly, if you want your business to succeed, you can't just focus on the next big thing you want to sell and earn money on and be profitable and grow. You need to invest in the security, because all it may take is one click of a bad link that can absolutely destroy your reputation in the marketplace. So all your plans for growth and business can be completely undone just by a bad click. And so what I'd say that organizations need to go away and don't just use the buzzword, but actually take it and see what it means for your organization, is security first. You cannot have a successful business long term if it's built on insecure foundations. So security first has to be the mantra that organizations take forward and invest appropriately to set their businesses up for success.
Well, thanks a lot, Martin. And thank you, everyone, Mohammad, Yuosof, for joining in. It's been interesting. The remote working is here to stay. We have to be creative. We have to evolve. We have to create awareness in the organizations. And clearly, even if the businesses are not, entirely functioning online, there's a significant function of the business that does have impact, and you need to protect yourself much ahead of time. I mean, the next generation is very tech savvy, that's around the corner, and they also bring with them the inherent risks and benefits as well. So I'll hand it back to Anisha. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for being able to conduct this session with the three experts from the industry. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.